Stephen is a hunter and a food enthusiast. In search of legendary delicacies, he travels far and wide, venturing into dangerous places to source fresh ingredients for his culinary creations, aiming to satisfy his cravings. This time, he's in southeastern Montana with his brother Matt, preparing to hunt turkeys. During this season, turkeys are among the tastiest foods. The two, leading alpacas, enter the wilderness, their laughter echoing, signaling their joy. However, soon the weather turns as snow begins to fall, potentially jeopardizing their hunt. They set up camp in a clearing and split up to scout the area. With only an hour left until dusk, their goal shifts from hunting to looking for signs of active turkeys. Instead of turkeys, they encounter several elks. Frustrated by the irony of not finding elks when needed, Stephen continues his search. Shortly after, he stops upon hearing voracious eating sounds. Following the noise, he treads carefully into a small grove, sensing he's near the turkeys area. He hides behind a stump, uses a tool to mimic turkey calls, and soon hears real turkey responses. Stephen attracts attention, and as he grabs his shotgun, a turkey head pops out of the bushes. Startled but composed, he waits for a clear shot and decisively fires, killing the turkey after a few flutters. Elated by the smooth hunt, Stephen approaches the beautiful bird, admiring its mature male feathers. The triumph contrasts sharply with the dead turkey, stirring Stephen's emotions as he savors his prize. After calming down, he carries the turkey back, walking triumphantly like a victorious general to the campsite where Matt shares his own experience. Hiding in the bushes and imitating turkey calls, Matt's efforts attract a coyote. The face-off is awkward until the coyote runs off, cursing. Matt was quite speechless. He shared his encounter with Stephen, which amused them both. Next, they prepared dinner. Stephen sliced open the turkey's belly, removed the gizzard, and peeled off its tough skin. The rest was edible. He then cut out various organs, arranged them together, and added water to a pot before placing the organs in to simmer on low heat. After 15 minutes, the organs were cooked. Stephen added some chili peppers, and they both tasted their creation, finding it quite fresh and tasty. After dinner, they planned the next day's activities, deciding to hunt in different directions again. When night fell, they both slept soundly. The next morning, at dawn, they set out separately. Stephen returned to the previous day's location, while Matt, acting on intuition, headed south. Reaching a high ground, he decided to stay and mimic turkey calls, remaining highly alert to distant sounds. His patience paid off as a confident male turkey strutted towards him, emitting mating calls. Matt understood and greeted it with a single shot, killing the turkey on its courtship path, proving the old saying about lust leading to downfall. Matt approached and examined the turkey, playing with its feathers. He then removed the organs, hiding them under a tree, and continued hunting. Meanwhile, Stephen also found 2 turkeys and lay down to avoid detection. Knowing that turkeys have poor vision but keen hearing, he waited for them to come closer. As they approached, Stephen took aim and shot just as they stopped, killing the male. He sighed with relief, but felt a pang of sympathy as the female turkey seemed confused and ran off. He then approached, picked up the heavy turkey, and removed its feathers and organs, storing them in a bag before tying the turkey to his backpack for the return trip. Back at camp, he hung the turkey alongside the previous day's catch, waiting for Matt, who returned with 2 more turkeys. Both were thrilled with their successful hunt. They struck while the iron was hot and began preparing the turkeys by plucking their feathers. Afterward, Stephen started a fire, looking forward to his favorite part. He cut a plump portion from the turkey's rear, wrapped it in foil, and gently pounded it with a stone to tenderize the meat. He then added some chili powder, coated it in breadcrumbs, and fried it in oil. In no time, the turkey cutlets were golden brown and crispy, making them incredibly appetizing. But that wasn't all. Stephen sliced a lemon and laid the slices out, placing the cutlets on top to infuse them with the citrus flavor. Dinner was ready, and they eagerly tasted it. The cutlets were crispy on the outside, tender on the inside, and carried a refreshing tanginess that made them even more enjoyable. The two were deeply indulged in the culinary delight, finding it hard to stop eating. This turkey hunt had ended perfectly. Stephen had hunted a turkey, cut a piece from its rear, tenderized it, breaded it, and fried it. The crispy, lemony cutlets were a delicious treat. This time, he had come to southeastern Arizona to pursue the king of the mountain lion. Teaming up with two experienced lion hunters, Green and Mitchell, who had trained a group of loyal and fierce hunting dogs, they had become nightmares for the mountain lions. A large ranch in the area would annually suffer from lion attacks on its cattle. Green and Mitchell's job was to protect the ranch, which still lost about 50 cattle last year despite their efforts. As Stephen was new to mountain lion hunting, Green gave him a crash course, such as how to differentiate between dog and lion tracks. The lion's paw prints are wider, and the toe pads are different. After the explanation, they began looking for more tracks and soon found a clear one, which Green estimated to be a day or two old. Nearby, they discovered a deer carcass, completely devoured except for its head. Facing such a formidable predator, Stephen was eager for the next day's hunt. At dawn, the hunting dogs were ready to track the mountain lion, cornering it against rocks or up trees, where the hunters would then shoot it with revolvers, chosen for their portability and knocking power. Now, as the dogs picked up the scent of the mountain lion and began their chase, the hunters slowly followed. Whenever encountering mountain lion tracks, Stephen couldn't help but crouch down to observe, his curiosity about the mountain lion growing. Suddenly, one of the hunting dogs started barking urgently, signaling it had detected the mountain lion. The dogs have highly sensitive noses and can detect faint scents left on rocks. More dogs began to bark, indicating that mountain lions frequented this area, though unpredictably. This was a significant challenge for the dogs, as they needed to discern the freshest tracks to ascertain the lion's escape route. This process could take anywhere from half an hour to half a day, requiring the lion hunters to be patient. Fortunately, today's luck was better. The dogs lined up and started running, indicating they had picked a direction. Led by the lead dog, they chased after the lion's position. However, the good times didn't last long. After climbing to the rock's peak, the dogs became confused again. The hunters realized they shouldn't waste more time there and led the dogs deeper into the territory. After an afternoon of searching with no findings, they reluctantly gave up the hunt. That night, Stephen felt incredibly disheartened. He lay in bed, unable to fall asleep for a long time. Time flew, and 3 months later, Stephen returned to the same place, ready to continue the previous challenge with the same two lion hunters and their elite team of fighting dogs. They quickly found fresh paw prints, boosting their morale as it seemed an active mountain lion was in the area. The discovery excited everyone, especially the dog team. However, as time passed, they still hadn't caught anything, sinking Stephen's heart again, worrying that history might repeat itself. However, Green soon brought good news. The dog team had cornered a mountain lion. When Stephen arrived, he realized it was a misunderstanding. The youngest dog in the team had mistaken a young bear for a lion. This mix-up was somewhat amusing. They continued searching for the mountain lion in the volcanic terrain, where the higher temperatures made scent tracking challenging. When they reached the rock peak, the dogs started barking again, indicating the lion had spent the night there, but now the trail seemed to disappear. Stephen, observing the challenging terrains they had traversed, felt the difficulty of being a lion hunter. After so much effort, they still hadn't seen a trace of the mountain lion. It was a tough hunt. Now, with daylight dwindling, although reluctant, they had to end today's journey. This is the allure of hunting. There is no fixed script or cooperating actors. As for the outcome, both luck and effort are indispensable. Although Stephen was not entirely satisfied with this ending, he realized the value of perseverance, which was his greatest takeaway from this experience. This also included a bit of self-consolation, which is the ultimate challenge of wilderness survival. If you crave a chicken cutlet, hunt a turkey. If you desire a steak, hunt a white-tailed deer. Freshness is the key to ingredients. A man named Stephen is a full-time hunter and a gourmet expert. This time, he came to the southern border of the United States, preparing to hunt American bison, a beast weighing over 1,000 pounds and the largest mammal in North America. Even wolves hesitate to provoke them. He is in the vast Sonoran Desert, dominated by low vegetation, an ideal cattle grazing land. A large local ranch competes with the roaming bison herds. They tolerate the presence of bison, but, to protect the grasslands, must keep the herd within manageable limits. Thus, hunters like Steven have their role. Today, he is permitted to hunt an adult bison, but unfamiliar with the terrain, he searches tentatively for any sign of them. Currently, there are about 500,000 bison in North America, 94% of which are on private lands or privately owned. In this region, there are about 100 bison, descendants of 10 females and 1 male released 35 years ago, roaming tens of thousands of acres. As Steven moves, he takes out his binoculars to watch. As time passes, the weather grows hotter, and he feels dehydrated. If not for maintaining some dignity, he jokes about wearing just a thong to chase the bison. In such scorching weather, likely only birds are willing to patrol. Steven complains while continuing his search. His efforts pay off when he finally spots a bison. To avoid startling it, he immediately crouches down and sets up his high-power binoculars for a closer look. The image of the bison becomes much clearer, but Steven still refrains from acting hastily because the heat could cause the organs to swell before skinning, affecting the meat's quality. The wise approach is to watch the prey until the evening, when it cools down. Time slowly passes, a torment for Steven as he withstands the heat, keeping his eyes fixed on the herd, fearing they might escape. After enduring the painful wait, 4 p.m. finally arrives, and he can begin. First, he prepares his bullets, loading them into the magazine and fitting it into his rifle. The weapon is ready. The next step is to choose a target, which requires waiting for the bison to stand up for a clear shot. When the shadows covered the herd, the bison began to stand and graze. After waiting a moment, Steven's prediction proved correct. He packed up his binoculars, took out his rifle, and began to quietly aim. Soon, he selected a target and, unbeknownst to the animal, pulled the trigger. The bison fell instantly, while the rest of the herd, startled by the gunshot, scattered in all directions. Steven took a deep breath, containing his excitement, and continued to watch. These bison were temperamental and wild. A charge from them could trample a person in seconds. After waiting a while and seeing the herd move away from the scene, Steven cautiously approached. The bison was a few years old, a female much smaller than a male, but with tenderer meat, which would taste better. Moreover, this meat was enough to fill his freezer. He first cut the cow's neck to drain the blood and waited a bit before beginning to work. Using a small knife, he started at the ankles, slowly peeling off the hide. After this step, he began to dismember the limbs and hung the legs on a nearby tree. The meat quality was excellent, mostly lean, which pleased Steven greatly. He hastened his work, hanging each leg on the tree to cool them quickly, essential for preserving the meat's flavor. Next, he cut the loin and hump meat, his favorite parts. Gradually the sun set, replaced by a bright moon. 3 hours had passed since the hunt began, and he had much more work to do. Each part of the large bison was big and heavy, rapidly draining Steven's energy. He dared not stop to rest, as the wild and the scent of blood could attract dangerous predators at any moment. After more busy work, Steven finally finished butchering the bison. By then, he was starving. He started a fire and cut a small piece of liver to grill over the charcoal. When the time was right, he flipped it over. Soon, the liver was cooked. Steven tasted it, finding the flavor very primal. After eating, he took out his sleeping bag and immediately fell asleep. The next day was another energetic one. Steven woke from his sleep, ready to transport the meat down the mountain. Unable to complete the task alone, he called for help. The ranch owner came with some horses. They cut the meat into pieces and packed it into bags. During this time, Steven sliced off the tongue to use for a special dish, and the head, a valuable resource, was also split in two after some effort. They packed up everything and then set off on their return journey. Back at the ranch owner was ready to teach a technique for preserving meat. First, the large pieces of meat had to be carefully sliced into thin strips. Then, they were salted for curing. After that, they were taken outside to dry in the sunlight for 2 to 3 days. This was possible thanks to the local climate, which was extremely dry with little humidity in the air. The meat was hung high up, mainly to keep it away from dogs. Over time, the beef completely turned into jerky. Jerky has many uses. For example, it can be pounded into powder, then mixed with water to make meat floss, a tasty snack. After the serious work was done, it was time for some relaxation. They planned to host a dinner, with barbecue as the main dish. First, many cuts were made in the beef. Then a grill was prepared. The beef was laid on the grill and slowly roasted over charcoal. Meanwhile, the farm's chef was preparing a type of flatbread with fillings made from the bison's tongue. Additionally, there was another dish, Stephen's favorite, beef heart corn cakes. The heart was fried with tomatoes, onions, and peppers, and then wrapped in cornbread. After everyone's diligent preparation, a rich dinner was ready. They sat together, enjoying the feast, with everyone thoroughly enjoying the meal. It was a joyful banquet. Previously, Stephen hunted a 1,000-pound bison, spending 4 hours butchering it and taking all the parts. He then hosted a grand dinner. This time, he has come to the Southern Alps of New Zealand, prepared to hunt the elusive red deer. The Southern Alps are characterized by glaciers, high mountains, and rolling grasslands, home to a plethora of wildlife. Red deer, an introduced species from 19th century Europe, have proliferated due to a lack of natural predators, necessitating control by hunters. Marty invited a local friend, Remy, a writer, fashion designer, and tour guide, to help Stephen. Remy explained the local terrain and then drove him into the mountains. Along the way, he introduced another local animal, the wild sheep, which are also delicious. They planned to hunt lambs first to stock up on food for the coming days. Upon reaching the high mountains and spotting a river in the valley with several sheep nearby, Stephen aimed to shoot a lamb in the head. He used his friend as a support, aimed briefly, and fired at a brown lamb. After waiting a moment, they went forward to check and found it was a perfectly sized lamb, hit by Stephen in the shoulder. They arrived at an open area, opened the lamb's belly, and removed the innards before tying it to the front of the vehicle. They then chose to continue up the mountain, which took some effort. After reaching the summit and unloading all their supplies, Stephen's friend said goodbye and began the journey back. With a few hours left until dark, Stephen quickly set up his tent, then skinned the lamb and sorted the meat into packages to protect it from flies. After finishing, he went out to scout the area. As an intruder, he knew nothing about the place and realized that observing more would help him plan for the next day. Night fell quickly, and although he saw nothing, he gained some understanding of the terrain. The next day, a thick fog suddenly enveloped the area, severely limiting his visibility. Stephen went to the highest point of the mountain to wait for the weather to clear. Unfortunately, the fog only thickened over the hours. He had to change his plans, deciding to descend the mountain and wander in search of game. After a while, Stephen heard some noises ahead, but couldn't identify them. He approached slowly, but his footsteps startled the creature, causing it to run away. Frustrated, Stephen understood that it was not a suitable day for hunting. His only option was to return to camp and eat the unfortunate lamb. He tied a leg of lamb to a tree trunk and roasted it over an open fire. As the temperature rose, the blood and fat dripped down, making it look delicious. After a while, once the lamb's skin crisped up, he stopped, tore off a piece of meat, sprinkled some chili powder on it, and began to taste it. The flavor was superb. The lamb's meat was so tender, it nearly melted in his mouth. Stephen couldn't help but remark that it was definitely one of the best meats he had ever eaten. The next day, as the fog finally cleared, Stephen admired the beautiful scenery while embarking on his journey to find red deer. He navigated various terrains and continually used his binoculars to observe. Over the next few hours, he spotted several deer but no red deer. Finally, around noon, he spotted a young male red deer. Instantly energized, Stephen began planning his approach. He immediately set off, but about halfway there, he encountered a problem. The ridge's crest was crowded with deer, all intently watching him. If he approached rashly, he could easily startle them, alerting the red deer to the danger. After careful consideration, Stephen decided to slowly approach and observe the deer's reactions. Unfortunately, the situation seemed pessimistic as they appeared agitated, with some deer even making warning sounds at Stephen. At this point, he had no choice but to retreat and select a completely different route, taking a much larger detour that would take several hours, but he had no alternative. Before setting off, he filled a bottle with water from a stream and began the tedious and tiring journey. Fortunately, his luck held up today. When he arrived at the spot, the red deer was still there, resting. Stephen carefully observed and patiently waited for an opportunity, also adjusting his rifle. As he hoped, the deer finally stood up. Seeing the deer raise its head, Stephen slowly raised his gun and decisively fired. However, the shot seemed to miss as the startled deer jumped a few times before stopping again. Just as Stephen was about to take another shot, a scene unfolded that left him astonished. A much larger red deer emerged from the bushes, instantly catching Stephen's attention. He wanted to hunt this larger deer, but having already fired once, he had to ensure the first deer would fall, while the other deer fled further away. Regrettably, Stephen could only watch them leave. He went to check on the first deer and found it already down. Looking at its large antlers, Stephen felt a sense of accomplishment. After admiring his trophy, he cut open the deer's belly, removed the innards, and then cut off a tender piece of loin meat. As it was getting dark, and there were no wild animals in the area, he felt safe leaving the deer overnight and planned to return the next day to process it further. Back at camp, the sky had completely darkened. He began making dinner by slicing a pre-prepared pumpkin into thin pieces, adding the deer meat, sprinkling some seasonings, and then adding some water to cook over the fire. After some time, dinner was ready. Lifting the lid, a delicious aroma spread, tantalizing his taste buds. Stephen eagerly tasted it. The deer meat was tender, the pumpkin sweet, and together they elevated the flavor. He thoroughly enjoyed his meal. The next day, he would return home with his prey, very satisfied with this hunting trip. The man had hunted a lamb, tied its leg to a branch, and enjoyed a delicious roasted lamb leg. Capitalizing on his success, he also hunted a deer. Stephen made a venison and pumpkin soup. He is a full-time hunter named Stephen, who came to New Zealand to hunt pigs with a professional hunter, relying only on 2 hunting dogs and a knife. New Zealand's South Island has a diverse ecosystem, with glacier basins, rolling grassy hills, and dense coastal forests. The professional hunter, Darren, is also a dog trainer. He introduced his 2 main dogs to Stephen, named Big Tiger and Little Tiger. The 2 set off by car, and Darren shared the local history during the drive. Wild pigs were brought here by ship from Europe in the 18th century. Due to a lack of natural predators, they reproduce very quickly and have become the most despised animal by locals. To protect the ecological balance, skilled hunters have stepped forward. Soon, they reached their destination. Darren released the hunting dogs and attached GPS collars to their necks. At his command, the dogs dashed out like tigers freed from cages, easily picking up the scent of wild pigs. The 2 men followed slowly behind. Signs of wild pig activity were everywhere on the ground. Shortly, they spotted an animal, but it was a deer, not their target. Darren checked the GPS to locate the dogs, and then they moved on. After a while, they found a wild pig's hoof print. Darren assessed that it was either a sow or a boar, weighing around 70 pounds. His professional commentary amazed Stephen. This is what professionalism looked like. Suddenly, the dogs returned, ran a circle, and then dashed back into the woods. Darren signaled his partner to listen carefully. Soon, barking and a fierce pig's squeal came from the bushes, indicating a struggle. Darren, bold and skilled, grabbed a pig's leg. destabilizing it. The dogs fiercely bit the pig's nose. Stephen seized the opportunity to stab the wild pig's heart with his knife. With excellent teamwork, the pig finally stopped struggling. This thrilling scene was a first for Stephen, making his heart race. After calming down, they dragged the pig to an open area to process it. It was indeed a sow, weighing about 70 pounds, confirming Darren's accurate judgment. They removed the pig's innards and made cuts at each hoof, then tied it up with a rope to form a backpack-like shape. Stephen shouldered the pig, experiencing what it felt like to carry a bride. They then made their way through the mountain paths, back to the main road. Darren began to worry when he noticed that the GPS signal for the dogs was missing. The two returned on their path, noting that the signal was sporadically appearing and disappearing. Darren grew increasingly anxious, fearing an accident had befallen the hunting dogs, and unconsciously started to jog. After some hurried and slow tracking, they finally heard the barking of the dogs again. When they reached the spot, they found one of the dogs circling near the entrance of what appeared to be a wild boar's den. Darren took out a flashlight and shone it inside, confirming the presence of a wild boar. The underground tunnel had two entrances, and the dogs had blocked the other one, with the boar trapped deep inside the tunnel. The two men tried digging from above. Although the soil was loose, digging by hand was not an easy task, so they had to think of another solution. The dogs were excited, but couldn't break through from the front. The men found some sticks and started a new round of digging. Their efforts paid off, and after some intense digging, they created a crack at the top, through which the boar was visible, stuck in a dilemma. They took out a rope, tied it around the boar's neck, and started a tug of war. With their combined effort, the boar finally got free, but before it could rejoice, a sharp knife was plunged into its body, ending its life. After this busy ordeal, both men were exhausted but satisfied with the outcome. Darren generously rewarded the key contributors. After some rest, they began their return journey. Passing a stream, they stopped to wash the boar. Murky fluids continuously spread, and no matter how much they cleaned, the boar still seemed dirty. One cleaned, while the other gathered firewood and started a fire. Once the fire was strong, they placed the boar over it to singe the hair. After the hair was charred, they used a knife to scrape it off, then dunked the boar in water and repeated the process until all the hair was thoroughly removed. Next, they proceeded to butcher the boar. Darren, with his extensive experience, expertly cut the meat according to different body parts, turning the pork into what looked like pieces of art, eliciting praise from Stephen. They loaded all the meat into the car and headed towards the farm. Back home, Darren first secured the dogs in their kennels and rewarded them with a piece of meat. Then, the two prepared dinner. Darren cut half of the meat with the skin still on, sprinkled some salt, poured some olive oil over it, and placed it in an oven. They also prepared several vegetarian dishes, achieving a balanced meal of meat and vegetables. Eating it this way makes it less greasy. The aroma of the pork filled the entire kitchen, tempting everyone's appetite. The group enjoyed this wonderful time amid laughter and conversation. It was a heart-stopping battle. A hunter grabbed the wild boar's hind legs, two dogs tightly bit the boar's nose, and another hunter delivered the final knife blow. They processed the captured boar by removing its hair and then categorizing the meat, obtaining a batch of very high-quality pork. The man named Stephen is a full-time hunter. This time, he came to the southern Alps of New Zealand in search of a mysterious animal known as the long-haired mountain dweller, which has lived on the mountaintops for generations. Accompanying him is his friend Remy, an outdoor enthusiast with a curiosity for wildlife and mysterious places. Along the way, they spotted some large geese, stopped the car, and began hunting, planning to have a goose for dinner. After a gunshot, the surviving geese instantly flew away. Stephen quickly walked up and picked up the goose. Tonight, they were in for a treat. The two continued their journey, with Stephen expressing his excitement in the car. Before even reaching their destination, his enthusiasm was already mounting. The Southern Alps are a vast and steep mountain range, cut by glaciers, lakes, and tributaries. The top features Mount Cook, which rises to 12,000 feet. Because the next part of the journey was rocky, the two decided to proceed on foot. Before setting off, they checked their equipment to ensure everything was in order, and then resolutely began their hike.